watch it. But welcome to our free monthly Lunch and Learn webinar. Like we have said, please make sure that you are on mute, but please take advantage of the chat function where we'd love to see comments and questions, and we will have some time at the end of our session to answer some questions. If you haven't jumped on here before, I am Kate, Director of Thrive, and together with Kath, who is here today madly letting everyone in, we are both directors at Thrive Aged Care. And basically, in a nutshell, we provide support, education and expertise to organisations who support older people. Now, Kath and I are also both certified Positive Approach to Care champion teachers, learning directly from Teepa Snow herself. And we both have extensive clinical experience working across health and aged care. Just a reminder to pop yourself on mute, please. Here's a photo of us attending a road trip. We do love getting out and about, and we also do offer a lot of in-person training, advice and support. Like I said today, please keep yourself on mute during the session. We are expecting about 140 people in this session, so it's going to be big. Please use the chat function for comments and questions. We will send you a copy of the slides and also a recording of today's session. So we've got a bit to cover today. We could really dedicate a whole day to this topic, how we strengthen our communication for people living with dementia. But in the short amount of time that we have today, we are going to touch on these points. Changes to the new strength and standards, what is communication and what areas of the brain are responsible for successful communication, thinking about what changes happen for a person living with dementia, and we're going to touch on responsive behaviours and communication as well. Now that we know that the strengthened aged care standards are coming and will be here on the 1st of July. Now these standards have a strong focus on improving communication for all people, which is brilliant because we know that communication or lack of communication or miscommunication is a big contributor to clinical incidents and is one of the most prevalent reasons why we receive complaints from residents and representatives in aged care. So taking this a step further, there is actually a deliberate focus in the standards on improving communication for people living with dementia. And you'll see here on this slide that we've bolded some of the words where we think, there's a particular strong focus. So identifying and understanding communication needs and preferences of individuals, because everyone is different. So we have to tailor and adapt our approach. Understanding how different individuals communicate, including people living with dementia, and being able to communicate effectively, verbally and non-verbally with people. And the last point, really being able to identify frailty and communication barriers and really being able to plan care, knowing what those barriers might be to improve quality of life, independence and maintain function. So let's start with what is communication. And you can see here a few definitions. Again, we've highlighted in bold. Exchange of information, successful conveying and sharing of ideas or feelings, and a process which is information exchanged between individuals, either through a common system of symbols, signs, or behaviours. Now, looking at this pie chart, you'll also see that only 7% of communication is actually words. Most of the way. If you could pop yourself on mute, please, that would be great. Can you? Yeah. So again, looking at this pie chart, 7% of communication is only actually words. Most of the way that we communicate is through our body language, our movements, our expressions, what we make with our faces, hands and arms. Look at 38% of how we communicate has to do with our voice, the tone of our voice, the pitch, the volume, the pace. All these things convey emotions or might be used to emphasise points. So we can already see that our everyday communication is more than just words. So the first question I'm going to put to you, and I want you to use the chat. Why do you think it's important to adapt our approach for people living with dementia? Pop your ideas in the chat, guys. Give Kathy some more work. She's going to be monitoring the chat. While you do that, I'm just going to show you this slide here. Just pop yourself on mute, please.
You can attend this.
Thank you. Communication is complex. So when we look at this slide here, we can see that communication, this is a 5-step model of communication. I don't want to go into it in too much detail, but I just really want to highlight the steps involved in successful communication for people who have no brain change. Step 1, we need to think of an idea. The sender has to have an idea that they want to communicate, and this will be influenced by lots of things in our environment. Yeah, we need to clarify that idea. We need to know the purpose and what we want to achieve with the communication. And we have to think about how is the person we're communicating with going to perceive what we're trying to tell them. Step 2 is encoding. We have to get our idea into words or symbols or gestures that are going to give meaning. Yeah, because no two people interpret things the same way. So we have to really think about what's going to be meaningful to the person that we communicate with. So we need to know about the receiver's communication skills, their attitudes, experiences, their culture, in order to have clear communication. Step 3 is actually transmitting the message. How are we going to do it? Will it be verbal? Will it be visual? Are we going to write it down? Yeah. For clear communication to occur, the medium and the message must match. And then we get to the receiver's end. They have to decode the message. Yeah. They have to try and figure out the meaning. They have to translate the words, the symbols, the gestures, and make some understanding about it, because no two people interpret information in exactly the same way. And we know that incorrectly decoding a message can really lead to miscommunication. And then step 5 is feedback, and that's a vital part of communication, and that occurs when the sender and the receiver check in to make sure the message was understood. And it's a shared responsibility between the person who's trying to communicate and the person who's receiving that communication. So you can see there's a lot of complexity with communicating a message. And like I said, that's for anyone every day. Yeah. Now, thinking about our brains, it actually requires a lot of different areas to be firing for successful interaction by both people, the person transmitting the message and the person receiving the message. And now that makes me want to share with you some photos of the brain. So that's your little warning that we're going to have some photos of the brain popping up. And thank you to those who are commenting in the chat. So let's have a look at the brain. And now that we know the brain is really complex, we know it's made of 2 parts, left and right hemispheres, and the left hemisphere controls what we do on our right side and vice versa. Yep. Here we can see the brain from 2 men, roughly the same age, height, and head circumference at death. The brain on the right, this brain here, is from a man that died in an accident with a healthy brain. And the brain on the left is from a man who died from complications of living with Alzheimer's for 10 years. So I want you again for you to pop in the chat what you see in this image. What do you notice about the 2 brains? What looks different? Okay. And I can already see some comments. Certain part of brain functions have altered in people living with dementia. Shrinkage, yeah, great. So shrinkage for that brain with dementia, smaller and darker, looks shrunk, yeah. Size and colour, there's differences in size and colour. Less density, yeah. Lots of changes coming through. Dry, yeah. One is plump, healthy looking, the other looks worn out. So there's lots of structural changes, isn't there, going on in those 2 brains. More spaces in the left, more spaces. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So thinking about, again, the brain and the roles of the brain in communication, we know that lots of areas have a part to play in communication, especially now that we know how complex communication really is. So let's start with the occipital lobe, right? That's down here at the bottom, and it's at the back of your brain here. That's our vision processing center. Now that we know that 55% of communication is through visual, through body movements, facial expressions, yeah? Having a look at the changes there, what you were talking about, more space, shrinkage, colour changes, structural changes. How do you think the occipital lobe and processing visual information will change for a person living with dementia? Have a think about that and let me know in the chat how that might change. Let's think about the temporal lobe right here. It has a huge role to play in communication, in sending verbal comms through word finding and speech, but also interpreting communication. Yeah, and I've circled that area there. This little area circled here is deep within the temporal lobe. That's the hippocampus. And that is your memory center. That helps you connect memories and emotions. It's the area involved in making sense of what you see. You know, for instance, if I see a dog wagging its tail, I know perhaps it's a friendly dog. Yeah. And at the front, we have our executive functioning center, our frontal lobe. That's our thinking brain. That's where the information from the world around us, including communication, that's where we take it to make sense of things, to make a decision, to make an action. It's what we use to form communications as well. It's our idea generation, yeah. But it's also used to respond to communications, because this area here is responsible for planning, organizing, self-regulation, awareness. So you can see in that brain that has changed for the person living with dementia. Lots of areas are involved in communication. And thank you, Pam. Limited field of vision, interpreting what is seen. Yes. So lots of changes, interpreting visual communication, lots of changes for language, lots of changes for acting on communication, or even thinking about what you want to communicate. We're going to take a deeper dive into language today. We could talk about all these areas separately, but today, in the short time we have, we're going to talk about language. And for that person who's just jumped in, please pop yourself on mute. Thank you. Now, the first thing we want to explain is that dementia does not affect hearing. A person living with dementia might have age-related or other changes to their hearing. However, these will not be caused by dementia, okay? So let's move on. Early in this, people will miss out of 4. How long you got lost, do you think? Early in this, people will miss out of 4. How long before got lost do you think? Oh, Kath, like seriously. Early in this, people will miss out of 4. How long before you got lost do you think? Thank you, Gillian. Thank you. Yeah, how did that make you feel? Yeah. Early in this disease, yeah, people will miss 1 out of 4 words. How long before you got lost do you think? How did you feel when I got louder? Why are you yelling at me? Because, Kath, I was getting nothing. Oh, yeah. Why are you yelling at me? How did it feel when I got louder? How did it feel when my tone got angrier? Did I feel it? Did it sound like I was getting a bit frustrated? Yeah. It made it hard to work out what you were saying. Yeah. I was confused. Yeah. So we know hearing doesn't change for a person living with dementia, although you can have age-related hearing, and people can still hear tone, they can still hear pitch, they can still hear volume, they can still hear intensity. What changes is the ability to understand language. Okay, that's really important to remember. So unless someone cares an whole awful, nothing is going to get. It's not. Yeah. So unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So what changes is a person's ability to understand language. And for someone in moderate stages of dementia, they will miss 1 in 4 words. Yeah. And as their dementia progresses, it's likely to be more than 1 in 4 words. It might be 1 in 3. Yeah. These images here are of the temporal lobe, and the temporal lobes are located here. The temporal lobe is what helps you understand the world around you and respond to it. Now, in the left temporal lobe, yeah, you'll see that there's big changes in what's happening here. So this is a healthy brain, and this is a brain for someone with dementia. Yep. So what is the left and right temporal lobe responsible for? Well, the left temporal lobe is responsible for language. Yep. So it's responsible for vocab, comprehension, and speech production. So go ahead, sit at your desk, get your 3 left fingers, your thumb and your 2 fingers, and put them towards your left temporal lobe. Okay. Vocab, comprehension, and speech production. These are the skills that we lose with dementia. But we retain skills on our right temporal lobe. So go and take your hand, tap your right temporal. These are our strengths. Okay, and this is what we retain. Forbidden words, all the swear words, sex words, ugly words, racial slurs that you've ever heard, you'll retain those. Social chit-chat, the ability to talk back and forth. How are you? Yes, I'm good. Social chit chat. Rhythm of speech, frequency, and intensity and volume. Yeah. How are you today? How do you know I'm asking you a question? Yeah, because of the way, the frequency of my speech, my pitch. Mm-hmm. Music, poetry, prayer, and counting. These are things that are retained, and we hear that a lot. You know, someone who might not be verbal, living with dementia, but that song comes on and they can sing the words to it. Yeah. And automatic, autonomic movements, things we do without thinking. If I put my hand out for a handshake, you might put your hand out to meet me in that handshake because it's an autonomic, automatic movement. So when you think about how we can work with these strengths that are left, yep, the 5 strengths on the right temporal lobe, because we know the language change on the left temporal lobe, we lose with dementia. So thinking about that, I want you now to think about one thing that you can do to support changes to a person's language skills. What's something that you can incorporate just from that 5-minute little sharing that we've had there? What's something that you can incorporate in your day-to-day practice that can support someone's language skills? Pop your ideas in the chat, because if it goes in the chat, then we can all share it, and it might be something that we hadn't thought of. Use gestures, great. Slow, clear words. Use singing a familiar song. Singing, yep. So tap into that strength. Control volume of voice. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Visual prompts. Fantastic. Yes. Eye contact. So make sure the person has seen us before we engage and rush into what we want to do and talk about. Fantastic. Keep them coming. We would love to share them. So here are some just really top language tips. And, you know, it's all about knowing your person, because everyone is different and everyone with dementia is different. So you need to adapt to that person in front of you. But some general tips to think about might be allowing time to respond, 3 to 5 seconds, because we saw what's happening in the brain, all those gaps, the messages aren't firing as fast as they would. So give people time to respond. Use less words. If people are going to lose 1 in 4 words in the moderate stage of dementia, make sure we're not using long sentences. We're using short words. Yep, short, less words. More visual cues, like you're saying, because we still have some strength with our visual field. Yeah. Watch your tone, because people are going to, tone is something that we retain. So I might not know what you're saying, but I can tell you're getting frustrated and I'm not liking it. And tap into what remains. Social chit chat remains. Counting might remain. Music and rhythm might remain. How can we use that in our communication with someone living with dementia? And here's a little, I guess, rhythm to help you remember. Is language is on the left, rhythm is on the right. We lose on the left and we retain on the right. And that's just a little rhythmical saying to help you think about those skills, those language skills with the temporal lobes. So we're going to touch on briefly communication and responsive behaviours. Okay. Now, why do we use the term responsive behaviour to start with? Well, yes, we know terminology has changed, but at Thrive, we continue to use the word responsive behaviours because we believe that responsive behaviours describes what we're seeing. A person living with dementia who is just responding to something in their environment. The way that they respond to that stimulus has everything to do with the challenges that they are having with communication, with how they're communicating their needs and their wants. So they are responding to something, okay? So what has communication got to do with responsive behaviours? What do you think? Pop it in the chat. Now, as an OT, I like to use this model, and the model is thinking about the person, the environment that they're in, and what they're doing, the occupation. So under the person, we think about their skills, their abilities, their limitations, their health issues, what's happening to them internally. Yeah. The environment is obviously their surroundings. Yeah. It's not just their physical surroundings. We are in their environment. Yeah. So who is in their social environment? Oh, what happened there, Kath? My presentation. I'm just going to pop that back on. Sorry for the technical issue, guys. I don't know. We've got a little ghost. All right, let's get to that slide we were up to. Apologies for that, guys. There we go. Okay, so environment, I was up to that. So we are in the person's environment as well. And occupation is what they're doing. Yeah. Is it something that engages them? Is it something that's that we think should be easy for them, but it's actually very complex for them and they're getting frustrated engaging in it? Is it something that they're not interested in and they could be bored in? Yeah. So this is what we think about in terms of person, environment, and occupation. So thinking about us, we are the people in the person's environment. Do you think that our approach and the way we communicate could actually be a trigger for responsive behaviours? And I'm going to pause for a minute there because I can see that you've got some great things in the chat. Don't talk from the side, gain attention. Yep, so don't talk from the side. They might not see you coming. We might surprise that person and give them a shock. Don't use combative words or create agitation. Yep. Our non-verbal cues may not be open and can add to agitation. Exactly. Thank you, Michelle. Yes. So we, have got good intentions, but our intentions might actually be a trigger for the person living with dementia. Yeah. And their response to us and our approach might be seen as a responsive behavior. So, like you guys said, it could be the way we approach the person, where we stand, how we talk, the words we use, our tone. All these things that we're not meaning to do could actually cause stress in the person living with dementia, and they might not be able to communicate it to us. So to better support the person living with dementia, we need to change and adapt our approach to accommodate their changing needs. And we know that people are different on different days, and everyone, again, is an individual. So we have to really think about what's happening for that person then and there. So how we see a person reacts, their responsive behaviours, is a response to a stimulus, like I said, and it might be an emotional expression of need, or of emotional expressions of something that they need, or an expression of physical unmet need. But regardless, they're trying to tell us something. Yeah. But the areas of the brain that they would normally use to put together a well thought out, rational, appropriate sentence aren't working like they normally would. Yeah. And that's why we're seeing the responsive behaviour. And I guess it's for us to get curious about what that person is trying to tell us and what skills and strengths remain that we can tap into to try and uncover what's happening for them. Now, stress can impact how we all communicate. I want you to think about a time when you have been under stress. What has happened for you with your communication skills? Are you always reasonable and rational? Yeah. Think about that time maybe that you've been stuck in the car and the traffic's crazy and you're late to somewhere. Are you always communicating in the most reasonable and rational way? Now, when we are stressed, we go into survival mode, that old fight and flight. We feel the tension build up, our whole body becomes tight. We might actually hold our breath, and less oxygen is going to come to our brain if we hold our breath. And our brain is our emotional, controls our emotions. Yeah. And helps us make good decisions when it's firing. Yeah. Now, stress also has the same effect on a person living with dementia. So you'll see physical changes and it will impact their thinking. Yeah. So we can quite often see when people with dementia are stressed, they lose some of those skills that they actually have. Yep. Yeah. I love this PET scan because this will really show you what I'm talking about. When we get stressed, we still have reasoning skills. We have this, our frontal lobe, the skills that help us make rational decisions, the skills that stop us from telling someone what we really think about them or for giving someone a whack when we're angry or upset. Yeah. But people living with dementia, yeah, they have changes occurring to these skills, this frontal lobe, and you'll see that in the PET scan. Yeah. You'll see with early Alzheimer's, there's not much red going on in the frontal lobe. And with late Alzheimer's, there's pretty much none there. So they don't have the ability to think rationally, to control impulses, to consider their safety or the well-being of others. Yeah. But what you will see, right, in the black circle there is the primitive brain, the area responsible for keeping us safe, our flight or fight. Yeah, that area. And what do you notice about the area in the black circle? Now, red means brain activity. Yeah, it means glucose and brain activity. What are you seeing in the primitive brain as Alzheimer's progresses? We're still seeing red, aren't we? So we're losing this ability to make rational decisions, but we still have our skills there to keep us safe. Yeah. If we feel stressed, you're very active. If we feel stressed, if we feel threatened, if we've been given a fright, we've got those skills there, the primitive thinking to respond and keep us safe. Yeah. And that might mean if we see someone come to the side of us and try to help us get undressed, what are we going to do? We might whack that hand away. Yeah. Because we don't have the frontal skills here to know, oh, that was just Sue coming in from the side to help me have a shower. Yeah. So impulse control would be limited to exactly. So when we're stressed, it's really important for us to regulate ourselves as well, because the person living with dementia is going to pick up on our body language. They're going to pick up on our tone. And if we're stressed, we can put that stress onto the person that we're actually caring for. Yeah. And then things can escalate. So it's easy just to say, just breathe. You know, sometimes it's patronizing, just take a breath. But really, there's evidence around why breathing is so important. Like I said before, when we get stressed, quite often we hold on to our breath, and then we're not getting that oxygen to our brain, helping us regulate our emotions and our feelings and help us to make really rational decisions. So having that breath is actually evidence-based to get your brain firing again, yeah, to get you thinking logically again. So taking a breath is actually a really great strategy. And laughing is actually good because laughing will make you breathe. And what do they say? If you don't laugh, you'll cry sometimes. So regulating your own stress is important when you're supporting someone living with dementia. So some questions for you to consider when you're supporting the people living with dementia that you support. How can you maximise the skills that remain for that person living with dementia? Now, we've talked about the 5 strengths that remain on the right temporal lobe. How can you tap into them? Oh, how can I, there's meant to be a gap there, sorry. How can I engage with the person to use their retained skills? And how do I adapt my approach for success for us both? Yeah, because we have these frontal skills, we can adapt how we approach that person, yeah, so that we can really tap into the skills that remain for really successful communication and a really great experience with that person. So in summary, we know that communication is complex. It's probably even too complex to give you a complete overview in 30 minutes. Multiple brain areas are required for successful communication. Brain change makes communication difficult for people living with dementia. However, they do have strengths that remain, and we need to tap into those. We can be a trigger for responsive behaviours despite our best intentions, and stress impacts all of us, every brain, our brains and brains for people with brain change. Yeah. So how can we help someone living with dementia to avoid that stress so that we're actually tapping into those strengths that remain? And if we don't change our communication and our approach, nothing will change in terms of dementia support. So our education is based on Teepa Snow positive approach to dementia care model. And the positive approach to care is all about the relationship coming first, not getting what we want to get done. That we are the key for making lives, our life and relationship better for both of us. That people living with dementia are doing the best that they can, and unless we choose to change, nothing will change. Now, if you've liked this, 29 minutes, we're doing well. If you've enjoyed this Lunch and Learn, we actually have a 3-hour online masterclass coming up on the 24th of June. It's really going into communication. It's going into this topic in much more detail and teaching skills that you can use every day with your interactions with people living with dementia. When we send the email with the recording out, we'll include a link so you can check out this masterclass if you're interested. We love feedback because we want to make these 30-minute monthly sessions relevant to you and your teams. So scan this QR code or do the link that we send in the email and tell us how we went, or tell us what other topics you'd like us to present on. Yeah. And we are going to hang around for some questions and we will stop the recording. So if you would like to ask any questions, just hang on and fire away or pop your comments in the chat and